Well, thank you, Christina. And can I say that I'm very glad to be here. I was really sorry that it wasn't possible to come to Belfast back in March. I'm going to start by just giving you an introduction to Canning House because you may not have heard of us. Canning House is a 76-year-old NGO, and our single role basically is to promote understanding and relationships between the UK and Latin America. What we do, our daily work, if you like, is we do undertake research. We also produce newsletters and reports, and we hold events to brief people on the region. The people we work with include ministers and government officials. So the FCO and DIT, for example, are on our board. We work with MPs and Lords from Parliament, with businesses across the UK and Latin America, with diplomats, with regional organisations, academics, and individuals. The events that we hold include a wide variety of trade and investment events, which include subjects like sustainable development, energy, mining, infrastructure, so whether cities, water or transport, finance and food and drink. And this year we launched a major annual report which looks ahead across the region for 5 to 10 years out, and that's done in conjunction with Itaú Bank of Brazil, with Ipsos Mori, with the FT's Latin American editor, and with Control Risks. And our expert contributors and our speakers are drawn from a huge range of contacts in the UK and Latin America. And for the events themselves, we partner regularly with DIT, as today, and with the FCO, with Parliament, with corporate members, with embassies, with chambers of commerce, with universities, in fact, with anyone who wishes to promote a similar focus on Latin America and its diverse countries. But we don't sell Latin America. We're not a marketing organization. We are here to tell things as they are. So if things are not going well, we say so. The objective is to help you to understand the countries of the region and help you to assess which country, if any, might be best suited to what you do. And then we hand you over to whoever is best placed to help you pin down the exact in-country opportunities that you need, whether that is DIT or the relevant Chamber of Commerce or one of our corporate members or associates. Now, when we had the Belfast meeting lined up, the organisers of the roadshow suggested that having been in business for the longest of any of the Latin American centres, that Canning House would be in a good position to dispel some myths about Latin America. But before I do that, before we get started, I just want to give you a very brief overview of some basic statistics. If you look at the number of businesses which are importing from Latin America, or indeed exporting to Latin America by region, broken down by regions within the UK, you can see from here that regardless of which side of the graph you're looking on, it's pretty flat for all areas, including Northern Ireland in recent years. Though I have to say something weird's going on with London and its imports, which might bear some DIT investigation. But if you look at the overall picture by value, and specifically Northern Ireland, in recent years, so 2017, 2018, you've had approximately a 2-to-1 ratio between imports from Latin America and exports to Latin America. In 2019, you're approaching parity, but this is mainly by the imports falling rather than the exports rising, though in fact they have been. But what lies behind this is also interesting, because in 2019, Latin America and the Caribbean collectively was the 7th largest export market for Northern Ireland and the 5th largest import market. Albeit, if you look in the overall picture, it was some 1.3% of Northern Ireland's exports and just under 2% of imports, which is still a bit above the UK average. Within those countries of the region, of all the Latin American countries, in fact, Mexico was Northern Ireland's largest export market, but still was only 16th in terms of the overall export markets of the region. Now, if you look at the sectors, the top exports to Latin America and the top imports from Latin America, you can see that it's a pretty mixed picture. You've got the same topics essentially in slightly different order of importance on both sides. Now, obviously, you're not trading the same items, so there's something within the supply chains of these different sectors which is quite sophisticated. It certainly suggests a more sophisticated picture than the mythical picture that we all have, I think, of Latin American agricultural products coming to the UK and manufacturers and services go the other way. So there's clearly something rather more interesting going on there on the ground. However, I was asked to dispel some myths, so let's give that a go. I think the first myth is that it's a region. This is in fact a simplifying fiction. In reality, Latin America is a collection of 25 countries, more if you include the English and French-speaking Caribbean, with some common linguistic, historical and cultural roots. But these are no longer a sufficient practical guide to future trends and developments, at least for the major countries. So internally, within the region, Argentina and Brazil have got about as much in common as Italy and Germany, Chile and Mexico, as the UK and France. Indeed, the future might ultimately come to demonstrate that some of the countries labelled as Latin America are likely to have more in common with the US, with the EU, with the UK, or perhaps even Asia Pacific than with one another. So we need to be very careful not to treat them as the same. We need to distinguish between the genuinely common factors and those that differentiate them. If we look at broadly common characteristics, there is a heavy predominance of commodity markets, so agriculture, extractive, so oil and gas, mining, albeit to a lesser extent for Mexico because of its manufacturing base. There's a very sensitive environment in the region and it's of global significance, so they are acutely exposed to climate change and associated sustainability pressures on agriculture, on forestry and so on. But on the other side of it, they've also got the potential to lead the climate change agenda through environmental initiatives leading up to COP26 and beyond. They are also broadly exposed to US protectionism and also any trade punishments, most immediately for Mexico. They're very exposed to Chinese growth, especially in Chile and Peru. And also they're exposed to the potential fallout from any US-China trade spats by being caught in the middle. Another feature they have in common is severe inequality and underinvestment in education and skills dating back centuries. These are not easy to remedy in a timescale that meets their own population's expectations, hence many of the protests that most of you will be aware of that were happening pre-lockdown. So overall, they need to diversify, both in sectors and also in partners. They need to protect the environment, but at the same time, they're potentially a great partner for environmental initiatives. They need better governance and better security, and they need more external expertise and partnerships and finance. But at the same time, though they've got that in common, the factors that differentiate them are that they have a wide range of economic positions that they're in. Their stability is different from one to another. So in terms of the debt, the inflation, the size of the public sector, the size of the informal sector that Christina referred to earlier, which of course includes drug money. Their diligence and the effectiveness of their response to the growing public demand they're all facing to weed out corruption, bring down violence and crime. Their commitment to democratic processes, not just at home, but in the region, also differs. Their attitudes to Venezuela and its problems, for example. Also differing between them is their commitment to structural reforms, for example, to reduce the dominance of the public sector, to increase productivity, change pensions, labour laws, tax incidents, bureaucracy, and also to attract foreign trade and investment. All of these areas challenged further, as Christina mentioned just now, by COVID-19. So there are things that make them rather different. The second myth I was going to help you dispel was that it's an alien culture, hard to understand. Again, this is a wild generalization. Spanish is one of the easiest languages to tackle. Portuguese is broadly similar, but there is plenty of English spoken in the business world to get you off the ground. Official, legal and business cultures are diverse and they are different from the UK. But fundamentally, they work along continental European lines. So if you've worked in Europe, these will not be unfamiliar. And this applies to the legal systems, the business cultures, and the political setup as well. I would argue they are, in fact, more familiar when you get there than other regions such as Asia or Africa. They're just simply more neglected by the UK. But the fact is, there are plenty of UK-based legal firms, risk consultants, banks, DIT, chambers of commerce, to help you find out what you need to know in order to take sound decisions, to introduce you to equally trustworthy partners in the countries of the region, and to take some of the financial load, for example, through UK export finance. The last myth I just want to touch on is the idea that it's the Wild West. Despite the US film industry's obsession with Mexico, as you know, many big westerns are actually filmed in Spain. There are significant crime and corruption issues in the region, certainly, but there are, again, wide variations. So Mexico is in a very different situation to Chile. Even Sao Paulo is in a different situation to Rio. The capabilities of law enforcement and justice systems in Latin America have improved in recent years. And that progress is likely to be sustained because there's huge public pressure from their own populations for improvements in human security. But change will be gradual. Corruption is endemic, certainly. But again, it's changing, and arguably, it's no worse than elsewhere outside of Europe or the US. The countries fighting against corruption have made some great progress in recent years, notably in Brazil and other countries that have faced up to the damage exposed by Lava Jato and the Odebrecht and similar scandals. Progress, however, remains patchy. Politicians can be corrupt, CEOs have been sent to jail, and immunity does remain widespread. Prosecution and justice systems aren't immune from political interference, but the thing that's really changing is that public and press scrutiny are much stronger now. So really this is heading in one direction. One area that is a concern, a new area, is cyber. Criminals are unfortunately diversifying with notable success. I often think that if some of the criminals in any of our regions turned to serious business, that they could be immensely successful. But cyber protection systems, and you do have to watch this, are not yet mature in the region. And what that means is that you need to take care. But all of these risks are known in other regions. All of them are manageable for businesses with good risk assessment and due diligence, and of course, good partners to advise you and help you control those risks. So beyond the myths, beneath the headlines, in reality, and again, touching back on some of the points that Christina made, you've got countries with a large combined population, 650 million people, a large middle class, a large young population, very social media savvy and very connected, huge penetration of WhatsApp in Latin America, buying power to the tune of $6 trillion GDP, and governments that are broadly fiscally responsible. Even Argentina has recently reached agreement with its creditors. They're mostly committed to open trade and investment, though Mexico wobbles a bit from time to time. They all have a high dependence on agriculture and extractives, oil and gas and mining in particular. But they're looking to add value to these raw commodities that they've traditionally dealt in. And they're also seeking to diversify into other products and sectors. At the same time, socially, there's a hunger to develop and to reduce inequality. So they need very high levels of infrastructure, transport, energy, finance, hospitals, education, communications, the digital economy. Plus, they need injections of best practice to drive up productivity, streamlining their public services, for example, and project management skills are also in need in both the public and private sectors. So what does it take to get started? Well, as you're running businesses already, you know that business doesn't happen in a vacuum. But it's not a question simply of good products or services. It's also essential to understand the markets and the customers. And it's natural to shy away from opportunities where you don't have a firm grip on the risks, let's be honest. But the very fact that you are here today is a great start. So Latin America isn't as foreign as you might think. And just because one Latin American country might not suit your business doesn't mean the whole region is unsuitable. If you're an oil and gas or a mining company, you go where the hydrocarbons or the minerals are, and you are more subject to political disruptions because of your importance to the economy. But if you're a manufacturer or a service provider, particularly a small or medium-sized business, politically, you're going to be flying below the radar. Your success will be more dependent on consumer demand for your product or business-to-business supply chains, which is perfectly normal. And some of the medium or less bureaucratic countries like Chile or Peru or Colombia might suit you better as a start than, say, Brazil or Mexico. The key is to know your product and do your homework. Get suitable advisors, get them to help you find suitable partners, and do your due diligence on the latter before you sign your contracts. But there's plenty of intelligence and information and people around to help you. Many of those people are already in this virtual room. And particularly, I'm delighted to see that we've got Chris Bennett of the Caribbean Council and Tanya Hoyos of the British Columbian Chamber of Commerce, who are exactly the kind of people that you will need to get started.